Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Cate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 97. We're going to be talking about Don't Look Up, the Adam McKay film from 2021. Reflecting our early quarantine Q&A episode, we're going to be doing the post-quarantine Q&A because quarantine is totally over and we're all free to do what we want to now.
Unless you're Australian.
Unless you live in the Bay Area, for that matter. We're being optimistic.
Yeah.
We want to do a Q&A. And I would just put out there that this can be about anything. Horror movies, personal hygiene. The last one was super random, and I liked that it was super random. And I've been listening back to episodes lately, and it was kind of one of our better ones.
Yeah, it's just fun. Also, just Q&A is sort of maybe not the right word for it. It's like, I just like to hear from people out there. You know, it's fun to hear like what people are thinking. You know, what people liked or didn't like about episodes, or especially if you're one of like the crew of podcast people that we're friends with. Like, how's it going for your show in the quarantine era? Like, what's it like putting stuff out now?
Yeah, I feel like there's been the free flow of communication between people has been so changed in the last 2 years that it feels like it would be somehow extra special to hear from everybody and just how's it going?
Yeah.
Just check in with us.
Yeah,
how are you doing, people? And you can do so at WHATTHE at scarythoughts.org.
Or you can also message these Scary Thoughts Instagram account.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Or either of our personal Instagram accounts, whatever's easiest. Just do say hello and do prompt us to talk about anything. So before we get into this movie, spoilers ahead.
Yep. We do go off the rails with this one. It is one of those rambly episodes that is about 30% movie, 70% madness.
Yes. Apologies in advance. There's going to be a lot of ranting on my part. I didn't realize how much anger I had until viewing and discussing this movie.
Yep, and for me, it's just pretty much business as usual. So whatever you've come to expect from me, expect about that.
Same.
Yeah.
All right, so where do you want to start with this one?
Well, this movie fucking sucks.
I was hoping to ease into that.
And it seems to be that the critics and the audience are really divided in really idiosyncratic ways. Like, for example, The Guardian, which never found a left-wing climate cause it couldn't get behind, panned this film.
Yeah.
NPR panned this film. Breitbart praised this film. I think there's a positive National Review article about it.
Wow.
And then, like, just in the people I know, like, there's some super lefties who thought it was a piece of shit and was lame. And then there's, like, people who thought that it was, like, attacking poor people. Like, and so it's, like, it's really, like, to me, the reason why I wanted to cover it is how interesting the reaction is. Because some of these movies, you know, you're just like, oh, it's an ideological piece of shit. And the people who love it obviously are going to be the people who it was made for.
Right.
This movie, I have to assume they thought they were making it for a certain audience. Like, it's a climate change movie, basically. So obviously that implies certain things. But I'm curious, like, how it feels for them to, like, not have the universal place. Right. For example, if you made a movie right now about a black trans ballerina, it would get every Oscar. And It would just get them, right? Like, even if it wasn't the best movie ever, it's just that climate right now. This movie, I think they probably thought we're going to get a lot more praise.
Yeah.
And they have gotten praise from, like, the wrong people. Like, you know, like Breitbart gave it a positive review.
Yeah.
And then NPR panned it, which is like, seems like crazy world, which seems appropriate for the moment.
Oh, totally. It has many flaws, but I think one of the big overarching flaws is that, okay, before we started rolling, we were talking about The Matrix.
Yeah.
The first one. And when we talk about The Matrix and we think about how successful it is, like why it in so many ways stands the test of time, it's why so many people still love it. At its core, it is a solid action movie. It's got all this meta commentary. It has all this philosophy and psychology and all these ideas that run through it. But really, it's a kung fu movie.
Yeah.
And it's a really good kung fu movie. And all this other stuff is surrounding that at the core. It's one of the best action movies.
Yeah. It's also a great sci-fi movie, too, if you were like to put another genre. Like, its sci-fi
truly.
ideas are very, very good. Like
Right.
it's the kind of sci-fi that makes you think like, what would I do if I was in this world? And that's super
Fully.
fun.
Whereas Don't Look Up, what is it? And I'm not saying it has to have a genre and a category in order for it to be good or bad. I more mean at core, what is this movie? A comedy? It's not that funny. Is it a satire? It's not that insightful.
It's very clumsy as a satire.
It really is. Is it a disaster movie? The action is totally lacking. Is it a drama? Well, there are some very heartfelt scenes, but then so much of it is so hammy that those moments don't necessarily ring true. And a movie can be all of those things crammed into one, but I feel like this movie, by cramming so many things together, it's not chocolate and peanut butter. It's more like,
It's a Homer car.
well, it's more, well, yeah. I was thinking more like rather than chocolate and peanut butter, it's like carob and flaxseed.
Yeah.
Like it's a combination of the things you love together. And it's like, no, I don't like either of those things. And together doesn't make it better. It's not as good as the sum of its parts.
Yeah, this is a vegan, gluten-free Adam McKay movie.
Yes.
Because like he's made what I think are three of the funniest movies I've ever seen. You know, Anchorman, Talladega Nights, and Step Brothers. And obviously they all have Will Ferrell in common. He's kind of like a comedic genius. But those movies, there's not a line in any of those movies that isn't quotable. Like, you know, like I'd like to imagine my Jesus in a party tuxedo shirt. Like, that's hilarious. Or the entire scene where they're like negotiating over whether or not Ricky Bobby will say whether or not he likes crepes or not.
Yes.
Like those scenes are so fucking funny. Or like,
Yeah.
did we just become best friends? You want to do karate in the garage? Like, I could quote all three of those movies. And like, so that dude's clearly fucking funny. And then there's a interview where he's like, oh, I didn't want to make any more movies about like broy white dudes in suits. And it's like, well, you kind of are that. Like, and I think that like,
play to your strengths, dude.
yeah, like, and it's like you can parody the thing that you are better than other people can, you know? And I think that's
totally.
what makes it so funny is like somebody who's really into black metal is going to write a funnier black metal spoof than somebody who has an idea of what black metal is.
Yeah. Okay. I think I texted you the other day that I was wondering if we could get away with recording this episode that is probably going to pan this movie without using expressions like they were just trying to and sort of put onto the filmmakers, the actors, the director, the writers, what they were trying to do and speak from their head. Because that's, you know, like, let's talk about the movie as it is and maybe relative to things we've heard them say. But it can often be sort of lazy to go like, they're just trying to ram their message down our throats. Like, well,
Yeah.
art doesn't quite work that way necessarily. But there is something I find in this transition I think we've seen from McKay doing these incredibly funny comedies to these political movies to this, which is akin to my mind with stand-up comedians. I found, not as a rule, but almost as a rule, when a comedian gets married and has kids and obviously creates stability in their life, they get less funny.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx talks about this.
Oh, really?
He's like your first couple stand-up specials when you're raw and hungry are really funny. He's like, but once you get comfortable, your jokes are like, man, don't you hate it when you get a new Land Rover and then blah 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 blah. And he's like, people just can't relate to that. And I think once you're like rich and comfortable enough to like take on a cause, it's very similar.
Kind of, yeah. I was thinking that it's parallel to getting woke, is that suddenly you have this whole new perspective that you're bringing to your comedy, and it is not funny.
Yeah.
You know?
But, you know, like I think one of the big criticisms of this movie you've seen from like all sides of the political spectrum of reviewers is that it's just not that funny. There are really funny moments in it. Like,
in moments in this movie? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so it's not like a completely unfunny movie. It's just a bit long. Like, I think if it was 45 minutes shorter, I think people would think it was funnier overall.
Maybe. But I think that that's true of what I was saying about, like, let's say stand-up comedians, keeping it to just them, this idea of like getting woke or having a political agenda. Like, this has happened to Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle is now this like ranting grandpa angry at trans people that he doesn't understand.
Have you seen that special?
The newest one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you think it was funny?
There are moments that were funny. Mostly it was just like, dude.
Space Juice?
Space Juice.
You're laughing.
The
See,
Space Juice
it's
was
fucking hilarious.
Space Juice was one of the funniest things I've heard in the last
I would
year.
argue that the special overall is more offensive to Jews than it is to trans people. I would say if you look at like the meanness of the specific jokes,
sure,
the Jew jokes are worse.
Okay.
But they're not wrong.
Okay.
You know, but so why is Hollywood's favorite protected class the hubbub right now?
Well, because he's been ranting about queer people for 3 specials now, and
it's a little much.
It's tiresome.
Yeah.
Okay, but I don't want to talk about Chappelle for the next. I just more mean like, I'm not saying there is nothing funny in that special. I'm saying that special is mostly not comedy. It's just watching someone go off. And that's happened to David Cross, who I also love. He's not funny anymore. It's just that he's laying into this agenda where the jokes. It's the same with Sarah Silverman.
I think people just get
Oswalt.
old, man. I think people just lose the edge. Like Lou Reed's later albums are fucking terrible. David Bowie's later career is fucking terrible.
Disagree.
It's terrible. Compared to like Ziggy Stardust. You know what I mean? Like the heights that people reach. Like you have Eddie Murphy from Raw and Delirious, and now the motherfucker is walking around in a daze and Coming to America too. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I think it's just, it happens to everybody.
Not everybody.
Who is better?
Writers get better. Directors get better.
Whose last work is better than their first or second work? I can't name anybody.
James Joyce,
Deleuze and Guattari. Deleuze and Guattari, that doesn't even count. That's like
I'm just thinking canon. Like so much of what we think of as the canon are not the first Ramones record. They're the 800-page novel that someone got to spend 10 years writing.
I think that genius and hunger produces better work than genius and experience.
I think that is just a random rule that is sometimes true and sometimes not.
The first Misfits album is better than anything Danzig did after that.
I don't think the Misfits stands as a testament to being able to say anything wide sweeping about art in general.
Is there a better art than the first Misfits album?
Yeah.
What?
Every book on that bookshelf is better than the first Misfits album.
I could find plenty on that shelf.
Oh my God, this is so boring.
I can see that USBM book from across the... that there's nothing more turgid than a 500-page book about American black metal. It is the worst book I've ever read. The only thing fun about it is that Andy Connors is in it. He's great.
Okay, so anyway, what I'm basically trying to say is in how it relates to this movie is that people losing their edge aside, there is also the introduction of a political agenda into a comedian's work that often totally undermines them as a comedian. And I'm not saying that comedians shouldn't be political. I'm not saying that going from someone who tries to go for the laugh to someone who tries to go for something thoughtful and complicated and has some sort of a political entanglement isn't worthy. But it is so often true that in the last, like, let's say 10 to 15 years, so many people who were funny got political and they became less interesting and less funny and tiresome as a result of their becoming woke or, for example, whatever we want to say, what happened to Dave Chappelle.
It's interesting. Like, I feel like, I don't want to say that it's only bad for comedy, but like politics is clearly great for other stuff. Like, I mean, for example, Rage Against the Machine or Run the Jewels, or I think even like post-trans Against Me is like so much better than, you know, like as far as like message. And so it's like, there's some people, you know, the whole go woke, get broke, or Donald Trump's famous, like everything woke turns to shit. It certainly seems to be poison for comedy, but it's like not poison for other stuff. Like, and I wonder why, like I don't wonder if it would be correct to say it's bad for comedy, but like maybe good for music. Like Public Enemy. Like you can't get more like political than that.
I would think that perhaps I'm thinking out loud, so maybe I'll edit this out if upon reflection it's incorrect. But it's not that politics is bad for comedy. It's that we're in a current climate where a lot of what it means to become political, comedians are generally on the left. And becoming woke has a component to it that is against free speech. And comedy depends on saying fucking anything.
I think
and
I figured
being
it out.
verbally brave.
Yeah, I think there's something to what you're saying, which is like, what's funny about comedy is when somebody says something unexpected. And when you know the ideology has a specific set of rules, and even especially now it has a specific lexicon.
Yep.
When somebody adopts like an off-the-shelf set of ideology, which, I mean, like an unfunny woke comedian's political perspective is no worse than the completely horrifyingly boring HR person at any tech company. Like, and so it's like, how, like, as unfunny as the HR person is, like, how could you say something like shocking if you're stuck with this sort of like language game that you're using? And the other thing too is like, I mean, I hate to get sucked into like the whole like woke, like what is and isn't woke is, but it is mostly serving power at the moment. Like Hollywood, the major branches of government are run by the left. Like it's like all the media companies, like pretty much all the HR, all the marketing companies. It's all pretty, you know, it's going that direction. So it's like, where's like comedy is like poking fun at power, right? So if that's power, you kind of have to go the opposite direction.
Yep.
Maybe it's just, you're going to have to, but there's never really been that many funny right-wing comedians.
Ever.
Yeah. It's like, it's pretty tough. Like there's comedians that have like, as close as you get are like really funny, like misogynist takes. Like Andrew Dice Clay for his time was fucking hilarious. Like it was shocking to hear that stuff. And it was so funny at the time.
I do not agree.
Well, you're just like, I mean, you're Canadian. You're just not going to get that. Like, like a dude wearing weightlifting gloves and like a leather jacket and a pompadour go like rhyming about like bitches or whatever at the time. It was so shockingly stupid that to me, like that's hilarious. Like I find a lot of this like men's rights stuff to be laugh out loud funny. Like it is so fucking funny to me.
I think your take on all of it is incredibly complex and not exactly, I think you are giving it a read, not necessarily reacting to it on its terms.
Oh yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I like crazy shit,
yeah.
You know, and to me, like I like that shit is hilarious to me. Like the real, like an extreme opinion held with like a wink is like the funniest shit to me.
Right. Totally. And that, okay, going back to this movie.
Like Christopher Hitchens calling everybody comrade is hilarious.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Coming back to Don't Look Up, it seems that one of the things that's lacking is a keen observation about the way that things are. And so we have this series of scenes that make a mockery of politics, but it's politics we're already familiar with, right? So we all know what the terms are. It's not introducing anything new. So this is sort of like, I'm sort of reflecting what you were saying earlier about an HR, but like we're all tired by the dialogue of contemporary news and politics. And this movie covers territory that's been really well worn by like Samantha Bee and Colbert. And like they've all been mining that territory for a really long time. And I feel like soon as Trump hit, every political comedian started just sort of like doing the, can you believe what Trump said today? And it became a feedback loop. And you and I have talked about this on and off mic endlessly. And so is everybody else. Like Trump wasn't good for comedy. It was terrible for comedy because he's an internet troll. And every time you make fun of him, you lose.
Yeah.
And post-Trump, to approach politics with the same strategy of mocking stupid people who you disagree with and being the same sort of divisive and condescending and like Hollywood woke, Silicon Valley woke, HR department woke,
Yeah.
as a strategy to convince people of your politics and to try to make them laugh their way into, like, the laughter is about, it's dependent on you mocking someone whose politics you disagree with.
Yeah.
And it's not actually funny. It's something that, in a certain sense, I think, helped lose the Democrats in elections.
Well, it's certainly going to make them lose 2022. Like, that shit is
Totally.
I mean, you can already tell, but it's interesting. Like, for sure, like in this way that, like, you know, your presidential candidate is sort of like the stand-in of your champion, right? Like, it's almost like a boxing match, right? But it's like, oh, you know, all these people who voted for Trump are super stupid, blah blah blah. Well, like, a lot of those people voted for Obama. Were they stupid back then when they voted for Obama?
That's
like,
right.
You know, and then also it's like, now if you're a Biden supporter, come on. I mean, how can you get, okay, first of all, dude is basically responsible for all the minimum sentencing shit that, like, fucked up how many communities, who knows. If you're bummed right now that you can't bankrupt away your student loans, that's Biden.
Yeah.
And the motherfucker is clearly weekend at Bernie'sing it across the presidential landscape. I mean, it's just like, so you look at that dude and you're like, well, if your presidential candidate choice says everything about you and that's your guy, I mean, come on, you got to look in the mirror, man.
Yeah. So either who you vote for president represents you and your ideology, or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And if you say that it is, then you're a Biden person. And if you say that it's not, well, then those people are not responsible for Trump in the same way as the narrative that you've been running with for the last many years.
I mean, to me, it's just like, you just hold your nose either way. You know what I mean? So to me, it's like I don't hold somebody voting for Biden's vote against them any more than I do Trump. So it's just two bad choices, you know, and this is where, like, you know, the proto-anarchist thing where it's like, I don't even vote because fuck this, you know, like, it does, but I don't think it gives you a moral high ground like some of the, like, non-voting anarchists think it does. Like, I think it's just, it's a thing you go do on a Tuesday every once in a while that doesn't affect fuck all, you know, unless you're somebody who Trump murdered in the last 4 years, which is fucking nobody except for Afghanis, which is what Obama did, which is what Bush did, you know. I think Meryl Streep's president might actually do really well in America.
How so?
Okay, so there's like a bit of a Trump impression going on right there, right? She has, like, Jonah Hill is the nepotistic son running things that shouldn't be anywhere near any levers of power. But there's also, like, elements of Obama. Like, when you look at all the celebrities that she's taking pictures with, they're kind of like people you like, you know, Mariah Carey, Hillary Clinton. They're people that are like, Obama was like, he's not the first celebrity president, but, like, he was really like a sit down with Oprah kind of president, you know?
Right.
And then the whole thing about her smoking and her approval rating going up, that was an Obama thing. Like, he was a secret smoker. That's my favorite thing about Obama. I love that he was like a Margot Tenenbaum secret smoker. Like, I just found that so humanizing and charming about him. And I just love smoking.
When was the last time you had a cigarette?
It's been a couple months, probably.
Months?
Yeah.
You smoke?
I have a friend named Gene that is a like a 5 packs a day filterless Camel smoker guy.
Yeah.
And I am powerless to not smoke around him.
it.
It's just so much fun to smoke cigarettes with him. And I don't touch him otherwise. But every once in a while I'll get like I'll like have to force myself not to go buy a pack of clove cigarettes.
Cloves are fun.
Yeah.
Especially when you were a goth.
Yeah, when it's cold out and you got Bauhaus playing, there's nothing better than a clove cigarette.
Yeah, I mean, the smell being the Madeleine, you know, cloves is like the Madeleine for goths.
Totally. I completely agree with that. I wonder if young goths smoke cloves. Like a Gen Z goth. Like, you know how, like, on Instagram there's, like, goths who look like completely perfect in every fucking way.
I've never
like,
seen any of them smoke.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Huh.
Like, they'll go as far as having, like, every Anne Rice book in a picture. And now there's a new sort of aesthetic that's kind of, like, very specific. It's like 90s Hot Topic goth. Like, it's like they're very much trying to go for, like, this goth only had access to Hot Topic in the 90s, and that's the look.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's almost like how, like, you know, I always use the reference of Japanese rockabilly guys.
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, you're not just a rockabilly guy. You're 1953 North Dakota rockabilly guy that worked on an oil rig, you know, or whatever. Like, it's so specific.
Yeah.
But back to the Meryl Streep. What did you think of her as like?
I like Meryl Streep generally,
I like her too.
but it's hard because to answer that question about almost anybody in this movie is a conflicted answer.
So I was thinking about an interview I saw with Dana Carvey, and it's somebody who was like not a fan of Alec Baldwin's Trump impression that was interviewing him. He was like, hey, he's like, how come your impression of George W. Bush was so much funnier and on the nose than Alec Baldwin? And Dana Carvey said, he's like, I think because deep down I really liked George W. Bush. He's like, I think you have to like, no matter how much you would criticize somebody or like do a killer scathing satire of them, if you don't have the ability to empathize with them on some level, you're not going to do it correctly. Like, that's why, like, I think Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights is so fucking great. And the French NASCAR driver is so fucking great. Like, I feel like even though those are clearly, you could make a case that they're offensive caricatures,
Sure.
But I mean, this is like Lex Friedman language, but like there's like love there for those characters.
Last night I was rewatching some like Nikki Glaser roast material when she's on the celebrity roasts, and you can tell that all of her jokes, which are some of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life, is Nikki Glaser roasting people.
She was great,
fucking vicious.
Yeah.
But she loves those people. She knows them so well, and so when she's tearing into them, it's coming from a place of like intimacy almost.
Yeah.
And love. And that I think makes it deeper and more resonant. Not as a rule, but I think that's kind of what's happening.
And I think that's why these like parodies in this film don't work. Like, because they're like, they sort of like, they're, like Ron Perlman is like, his character is like sort of like maybe an Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe a little bit of Arnold Schwarzenegger, a little bit of Clint Eastwood.
Yep.
But he does have some very funny lines that are like really
But that's the thing about this movie. There are funny lines.
There's like really good writing. Like one of the funniest lines is when Leonardo DiCaprio's character is about to take one Xanax. And he's like, I just take one of these, and then Jennifer Lawrence just grabs the whole thing and eats it. And then Xanax becomes a thing throughout the film.
Yes.
A spoonful of Xanax makes the news go down easier or whatever.
So just thinking about this movie in general, and maybe I should have said this up at the top of the episode, is I think I have some biases around this kind of movie that I didn't realize would come up when watching it. But so I almost feel like my opinion of this movie should be taken with a grain of salt because I don't like zany very much.
I love it.
And there was a lot of zany in this movie that I think didn't work. Also, this is something I felt with Dune and the new Dune and Us and The Dead Don't Die Even, the Jim Jarmusch film, is I find when I'm watching a movie or reading a book or whatever, that it's by someone or some people who I think are amazing and they are failing, I almost hate it more than if it was by some unknowns or some people who are doing better than they usually do.
Right.
It's a sort of a letdown. And then the other thing is, and this is very subjective and idiosyncratic for me, is I am totally sick of TV and movies wherein the majority of the characters are narcissistic sociopaths. Kind of sort of started with Seinfeld, and it is now sort of almost the dominant language of comedy. It's certainly informed by reality TV hero/villains.
I totally agree.
It's just so lazy. Like, how do we get the plot from A to B? Well, someone will just walk in and say the worst thing possible, and then the audience can love to hate them, and then the scene can sort of pivot. And it's so fucking tiresome. And this movie was mostly cartoonishly loathsome people with no substance. And personally, I'm just like, it's so fucking played out. And this movie, I hope, is the death knell for that style of comedy, but it's not.
Yeah, it's definitely not. But then again, some of the best moments in this movie are because of like the whole thing about the general charging for the snacks
But see, that
is
was
so
subtle.
fucking funny. It's
funny,
subtle, but it's like
he doesn't walk on camera and say something mean and condescending.
oh, I see what you're saying.
That one,
like
that
all
one's-
of Jonah Hill's dialogue.
Jonah Hill is so fucking terrible in this movie. It made me so pissed. And sorry, Jonah, if you're listening, love you, dude. But for someone who has made a career that started with being in his 20s, acting as a smarmy teenager, and still this late in the game, he's still playing that shallow, smarmy teenager, and it's just not funny anymore. It makes me sad and angry.
There are two lines that he has though that I think were fucking great.
Nope.
One is when he goes, "Thanks for dressing up," and like fist bumps Jennifer Lawrence.
That was actually
That
good.
scene
Okay.
is fucking funny. And
Yeah.
then his prayer to Stuff, I thought was it's just like stuff is so tight. Like there's like cool cars. Like to me, it was just like I could just imagine like one of these like modern like kind of rich guy YouTubers like legitimately saying that. You know who had a lot of
That one was very forced, though. It was just
Yeah.
like, who's doing anyway, sorry.
another Ariana Grande's song was a lot of it ad libbed. Like I don't know if you know, like which is weird because like you would think of songs would be more like tightened up. That was Ariana Grande, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know any of these young stars.
Yeah.
I thought she was very funny in it.
She's pretty funny, but again, you know, her line to DiCaprio, the like, why don't you mind your own fucking business, you old creep, was just like, oh, ha, 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 she was mean.
Yeah.
Like being mean is the punchline.
Yeah.
It wasn't a clever diss. There was nothing insightful.
she could have been mean with a funny line and it would have been a
Exactly.
lot better instead of just straight mean.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, or, you know, Jonah Hill, he walks into the room and like throws some snacks on the floor, says something mean and shuts the door. Like, it's just this tiresome thing of...
Yeah, and that's it again. Kind of like the whole like it has to be done with love. Like for example, in Community, people are saying awful things to each other all the time.
Yeah.
Especially like Chevy Chase. Like, but he had his funny like a lot of the funniest jokes in Community are them just like wrecking Chevy Chase, like saying something. But he's this character that they sort of tolerate like their old racist grandpa, and so they don't want to push him off on the island. They never really do. But like, yeah, it's like a lot of this humor where it's like, I don't want to say it's punching down, but it's like,
Well, there is a lot of punching down.
there's a lot of punching down, especially like to poor people, especially, you know,
Maybe
to
let's
me,
get to that later, but-
we'll get to that later. But like one character, I really liked Jennifer Lawrence's character. Like, for, you know, we were talked about hall passes earlier, like how my wife's hall pass is inexplicably Adam Scott. And I assume our audience knows what a hall pass is. Like when you're in a long-term monogamous relationship and you're like, if you were at a Holiday Inn and some celebrity were to say, hey, let's go back to my room, like who would be your allowed hall pass? Jennifer Lawrence is for sure mine.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know why. I think she's surprisingly good in things, and like her deadpan humor I really like. And there's a video of her like roasting Chris Pratt.
Oh.
Yeah, and
How's
it's one of those things where it's like they have two celebrities like say mean shit back and forth to each other, and she's just like,
Oh, like a roast battle.
kinda, yeah, but it's not like a really roast. It's more like an insult battle.
Yeah.
But her roasts to Chris Pratt are pretty funny.
So while we're talking about,
She's also crazy hot.
of course, but speaking of her and how hot Jennifer Lawrence is, there is something ironic about, okay, there's a comment, and I'm now forgetting what moment it was. It might have been on the TV show with Cate Blanchett and Tyler Perry, where they comment on her hair as a distraction from her message. There's some point at which, I mean, I know Jonah Hill comments on her hair, but there's some moment where there's a distraction from her message to comment on her hair. And the joke is, of course, that there's a shallowness that is undermining the message. That's so much of this movie, is that shallow concerns like this celebrity couple takes precedence over the end of the world. But I think what's ironic is that it seems to me that her hairstyle was done in this movie to undermine her hotness so that she'd be slightly more believable as a scientist.
But it's such an edgy current haircut.
It is, but
So at least in San Francisco, Oakland, it is.
But you've got Jennifer Lawrence, who is very, very conventionally attractive, and you've got her as like this weird high-strung scientist, and they've got to undermine that. They sort of have to do the librarian, the hot librarian with the glasses move to sort of it soften, not make her look dowdy or something, but make her look less like the fucking model that she is.
They use her weed smoking like that too. It's like a neg on her. And to me, it's like she was like designed in a lab to be appealing to me, you know, like this like hot girl that doesn't appear to wear like a lot of crazy expensive shit, smokes weed, knows Wu-Tang lyrics, is a genius.
Right.
I mean, like all those things are like, that's the mix for me, you know?
But the irony I find is that there's a moment in the movie that has someone commenting on her hair to show the shallowness of the commenter, but the movie itself is doing that. Hollywood does that all the time. Hollywood casts like incredibly hot people to play movies that are based on true stories where they always bring in a 10 to represent a regular American, right? And because God forbid you should actually see normal looking people in a movie. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem I always talk about having with horror. Like, you know, like in Texas Chainsaw, even the gas station guy's hot. Like it just ruins like
in the remake,
believability. Yeah, in the remake, yeah.
But I found that moment, the irony for me in that moment is the shallowness of Hollywood wokeness. Oh, these people are so shallow, they comment on her hair. And like, yeah, but you put that hair on her to distract from the fact that she's Jennifer Lawrence. So you actually did that in the first place. And your whole system does this constantly.
Yeah.
Where you're using conventionally, traditionally attractive people to play the everyman. And then you're trying to make a comment on it as if it's not something you are completely complicit in.
They do like a lot of weird moves with that sort of stuff. Like Cate Blanchett's character, like when she's laying in bed with Leonardo DiCaprio and they're talking about each other's lives. Like Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who's supposed to be this like great science. He's like the stand-in for like science, like Fauci. I am science. Like he, you know, he's like, I finally got my Star Wars poster signed by Mark Hamill. It's like, oh, cool. And then she is amazing. She's like, I was born into money, but I got away from it with like 3 masters. I speak 3 different languages. You know, she has 2 Monets, I think. She slept with 2 presidents. Like, she is amazing. And she makes this choice to be like, well, I don't care. Where are we going to go for dinner? And I think that like, that's like the most honest take. Like, kind of like being like, oh, you know, she's just using the shallowness for her career, sort of. And then other people, it's almost like the people who pretend to care, like we were talking. I was saying how like this is like the Imagine video that Gal Gadot put together. Like all those people, like of course you want to imagine all the people with nothing or whatever. You live in a fucking mansion. You know, when's the last time you had nothing? Having nothing fucking sucks. Yeah. And this movie, I think I mentioned on text, is basically Armageddon meets that video. Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe the problem is that there's not really a hero in this movie. And then the one character
it's smeared between 3 characters.
Yeah.
The sort of like moral center is Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, and Rob Morgan, who I'm not actually even familiar with.
A lot of the characters have like these reversals, right? Like, so Leonardo DiCaprio's character, he's like a legit real scientist, and then he sort of gets famous, and then he gets corrupted immediately by the fame, which I think is a very smart satire because we're seeing that in real time right now with some like big name people. And then Jennifer Lawrence's character, I think, is interesting because she just like crashes under nihilism and drugs, which I think is completely relatable.
Totally.
You know, and then, but then she's sort of like oddly redeemed by the faith of the dude she's fucking at the end. It's like, it's pretty much like Matthew McConaughey's character in Contact, like the sexy guy that believes in God, hook it up with the scientist that doesn't. Oh, wow, and she's made better because of his dick. I mean, it's like, it's just a weird thing to happen, I guess, you know? And then like Cate Blanchett's character sort of, I think she's in some ways like the most honest character throughout it. Like she seems to be just like she's like the most hyper real person in the movie. Like she can see through all of it and chooses this dark path. Yeah. But everybody else, it's like they're infected with this crazy shallowness. But the crazy shallowness seems to be like they've just been infected by the world. And that is as much of a threat to the existence of these characters as is the comet.
Yes.
Maybe. I don't know. Like, yeah.
I like what you were saying about honesty because I found for me, possibly the only honest moment in this movie that I thought was kind of the funniest, and I don't know how funny it was supposed to be, but when Chalamet, how did we pronounce his name?
Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, Dune Dude, and his friends go to the Bevmo where she's working, and like they're not taking it seriously. She's not taking it seriously. None of them give a fuck.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hilarious. Like she's like, yeah, just take it. I don't care. And they're like, really?
So that's the coming Gen Z storm that the woke millennials do not get yet. Is like there's an entire generation of people who are being raised in nihilistic chaos, and they're about getting their dicks wet and collecting NFTs. Like, and it's like they're like the return of Gen X, but they're serious. Like they're Gen X, but like Gen X actually grew up in like a pretty prosperous time, a very safe, prosperous time. You're like, I'm mad at my mom and I'm going to wear a 9 Inch Nails t-shirt. Meh. But like the economy was fucking booming. These people, they're coming online now. They're like Bane. Like, I was born in darkness. Like it's like real.
Can you imagine being raised in this moment with all that, but adding to it, having parents that I don't want to unroll climate change yet, because I think that's a large component to talking about this movie. But if you had parents who were not merely concerned about climate change, but reinforcing that the world is going to end imminently,
dude,
and
it's
you have a
so
child,
bad for kids right now. Like,
holy shit.
So like they're I can't remember who said it, but they were basically saying that like if you're a climate obsessed parent, you're essentially committing child abuse on your child.
Yeah.
Because especially like these bigger groups like Extinction Agenda and stuff like that, they're telling kids that the world is going to end in 15 years. And you kind of understand how you get to be like a Greta Thunberg type character. Like, this is a girl who has been raised in this ideology that doom is coming. But like, I was raised like that too.
Yeah.
You know, like I was raised under these double threats, thanks to the 700 Club, the double threat of the imminent rise of the devil and nuclear threat,
Yep.
like all throughout the 80s. And eventually you just get exhausted of it. And especially if it's like something you can't do. Like, I remember there was a moment where I felt so despondent as a kid. I had read like yet another nuclear book, like On the Beach or something like that. And I had this realization, there's literally nothing I could do to affect this. And as long as like the main climate groups are serving Wagyu beef at their events and flying everybody in on private jets and shit and not actually holding anybody to account, like the last big climate summit, their big agreement was that they would come back next year and be real serious. Like, so it's like you're seeing like on one hand, these people are telling you the fucking end is coming, and those same people aren't doing fucking shit. Like, what are you going to do? Like, it's your only course is nihilism or the guillotine, and you take it, you know. Hopefully that's it. What's your relationship with like climate stuff? Like, I was like way in on environmental shit. It's like how I got into copywriting, working at Whole Foods, working for farmers market companies.
Maybe make the question more specific.
Like, did you grow up?
I'm not a
like
climate change denier.
Right, but like,
This
you ever
household
like
produces almost zero garbage.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we almost don't buy paper towels. We use rags.
We're kind of the same way. We have a pretty low, I'd say a pretty low carbon footprint. But you know what?
I don't own a car.
The biggest one is we don't have fucking kids. The carbon footprint. Anybody who has a kid and wants to tell me shit about the environment, you can go fuck yourself.
One thing I will say, the worst thing, I take epic showers, scalding, Gaia, rapingly long, hot water heater draining showers.
I do the same thing, but just every 5 days.
Ew.
I'm just kidding. I'm on that Brad Pitt shower schedule. but like, like for me, like I was really like.
Can I say Gaia raping?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's fine.
I don't know if I stand behind that statement.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't be a pussy. But I was, I went to Berkeley like in like 2008 or so or whatever, and which was sort of the height of like organic foodie movement stuff. Like it was like peak foodie.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I worked for a grass-fed meat company, and then I tried veganism. Like to me, it was like all the thing, we changed out all of our light bulbs, all the bullshit, like all the consumer level environmentalism. But the more I dug into it, I realized like none of that shit matters at all. Like it doesn't affect hardly anything. Like what really matters is like, do you buy clothes from H&M? Like it's pretty much beef, cotton, and air travel are like the fucking problem.
Yep.
And no one is addressing any of that.
Yep.
And then the other thing is like you'll see people say like, oh, why doesn't America sign all these like climate accords and stuff like that? Like, well, because bigger countries don't sign them. Like China doesn't. So like basically like America could sign those things and kind of cripple their economy, and it still will not stop shit if China and India don't sign them.
Yeah.
You know, but and at the same time, like once you have all the fucking money, like America, it's super fucked up to say like, well, we wrecked everything and developed our economy because of it. You guys stop. Like,
right.
There's a green anarchist named Murray Bookchin who I used to be really into.
Oh, yeah.
And so he writes about this exhibit that was at the New York Museum, which was like, it said the most dangerous animal in the world. And it was a mirror. And he said how fucked up it was like, yeah, you could have Dick Cheney stand in front of that and he should probably take stock, but you could also be a 6-year-old black girl, you know? And it's like that message, now that's sort of how the environmental message was for a really long time. Was it like humans just in general, no matter who you are, you're the problem. And Brazil, you can't cut down any part of the rainforest, you know, because it's the lungs of the earth or whatever, even though it's not. And it's just weird. Like, so the more I dug into it, the more like I basically like know what it is to almost lose faith. Like I completely lost faith in this movement. Like all of the doomsday predictions never came true. Like peak oil 2000 didn't happen. 2010 didn't happen. 2020 didn't happen. So I have like a very like complex relationship to the whole climate thing.
Yeah.
Not a denier, but like I don't trust the loudest voices on advocating for change.
Right.
Like Cowspiracy, like that movie alone, like if you're going to watch an environmental movie this year, that's the one to watch. It's basically, so it's about the meat industry, and it's also Cowspiracy, yeah. And it's also about how none of the major environmental groups will say shit about the meat industry. So it's like,
really?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like they're very like, they just like Greenpeace won't say anything about it, or not. Maybe it's not Greenpeace, but there's some really big like Leonardo DiCaprio flies in type events, and it's like, you guys should all be eating vegan gruel here, you know, like if you're really serious.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of like all these dorks. They're like, the Civil War is coming, and like they're prepping, but not really prepping, you know, they're like half prepping. It's like,
wouldn't the best way to prep for an American Civil War to be to try to figure out how to get along with people better?
I don't think that's an option, man.
It's fully an option.
Well, I think the best thing is
if you want to confront a civil war in America, what's going to help the situation better? If people buy more guns, or if people try to figure out how to negotiate and get along with each other and have some sort of like respect for their neighbors?
To me, guns are like,
I'm not making a comment about guns when I say that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like, if you want to solve the problem of conflict, do you lean into conflict or do you lean into resolution? And it seems that like,
so
the type of prepper who's all in on this coming civil war, it's about aestheticizing the conflict rather than
it's
trying
totally
to seek
aestheticized.
collusion.
And it's definitely like, it's definitely part of an identity. Like unless you have a farm and guns, you're not serious about a civil war. You're just not, you know, like you're like one of these dudes with a Walmart shirt that says like, if follow me into battle, and if I turn the other way, shoot me, like one of these fucking morons. Like, it's just like, you got your off the shelf AR and your stupid hat and your fucking Hawaiian shirt or whatever. You're like cosplaying. And I don't think that there's ever going to be any sort of like civil war. What I think is more likely of a dark future is I think some of these YouTubers get to be so popular that they just seize control of the government, like by votes. Like I could imagine a future where it's like Defense Secretary Logan Paul, President Joe Rogan, you know, and then they've like changed the economy by moving it over to NFTs or whatever. Like basically they decided like all these old denture wearing politicians, they had their scam. We're going to have our scam now. And it's going to be at least more fun for people. Like I could see that as a better, not a better, maybe it is better, but like I could see like totally ludicrous joke candidates just coming over in force before there's ever an actual like civil war. What is it? Revolution 1989 is the name of this book, where it talks about Russia and how when the Soviet Union fell, people just fucking did not even believe it. Like they were just like, oh my God, like what? And you have like a gigantic country that was just had the rug pulled out from under it. I think something very similar could happen here. And I don't think it necessarily has to be violent. I don't think people have a taste for violence at that level. Yeah. I really don't. And if they do have a taste for violence, who do you think's going to be more successful? The states where you have to have a paddle around your fucking trigger guard and a 10-round ammo a magazine limit, or Florida? Like, I just don't think like a coming civil war is at all a realistic scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. People really believe in it though. Like there's a lot of like hashtag Civil War people out there. And they're dorks. They're all dorks. Yeah. Or they're special forces guys selling courses to dorks. Like that's the two people.
Oh, that's a good scam.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get back to this movie.
Okay. So earlier you had compared this movie to a crossover between Armageddon and the Imagine YouTube video. I sort of, in a similar vein, felt that this movie has more in common with Nanette than Idiocracy, in that it's...
That it's not funny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's political signifying as a stand-in for comedy. And although there are ways in which, because it is ostensibly a satire, it has a lot in common with Idiocracy.
Yeah.
Because it is mocking the top end of power. But I think it being a Netflix-funded comedy that is actually like someone have someone ranting at you. Okay, another thing that this reminded me of, this movie feels in parallel to Mansplaining. Like,
it's definitely climate-splaining.
Well, I was thinking like, kind of overall, like the issue with Mansplaining isn't the content of what's being splained. Mm-hmm. It's the rhetorical stance of the splainer, right? And that's the same in this movie. Is the issue with this movie for me isn't the content. Like, yeah, I'm in general political alignment with a lot of the concerns, and I'm against a lot of the things that it's mocking. Mm-hmm. But the rhetorical, ham-handed, smug, self-satisfied rant that is this screenplay, I feel is like what Mansplaining does. It's this like sort of overbearingness that undermines what's actually being said.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being talked down to in this movie, and I'm not even one of its targets.
Right.
What's it like to be, okay, and you know, a lot of the targets are like talk show hosts and celebrities, but some of it is like working class Americans being idiots.
Yeah, and that all spins out of like the plot of like turning the comet into like a resource to make money off of.
Yep.
And I think the tech founder guy, the billionaire guy, I thought all his stuff was really funny because, you know, I work in tech. So like, you know, a lot of the myth of these guys, it just feels very funny, you know, to me, like the whole thing, he didn't want to have the chicken was like too scary for him and his app, and the whole idea that like, I've just wanted a friend to tell me everything was okay. His weird high pitched voice. I just thought that character was pretty funny, but I thought the relationship between like, you would never be able to just tell the president what to do, no matter how much you had donated, because it's just a different power path. Like, you know, I mean, obviously none of this movie is realistic, but
no.
The whole idea of like, I prefer that, you know, I'm voting for the jobs that the comet brings.
Well, that was the thing, is when Jennifer Lawrence goes home and visits her parents and they won't let her in because they're angry because they believe in the jobs that the comet brings, it is sort of aligning a sense of an American who acts politically based on their self-interest of wanting employment is somehow... Like, we have a recent history of that as being a deplorable.
Yeah.
Those are the people who are bitching about jobs are deplorable Trump voters.
Yeah.
It's like, and it was sort of doing that same condescension to the average American. And I thought that was kind of like totally, I mean, on one hand, again, it's a satire, everything's fair game, etc. But it was sort of one of the instances of like punching down that I found really odd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to the title of the film, Don't Look Up, right? The thing that's different about the comet to like any of our climate concerns right now is that I think if you literally saw a comet in the sky, you could see it with your own eyes. That would be different than like, you could easily go online and convince yourself that the world's going to be dead in 15 years. You could also find pretty credible evidence that even though there is going to be a rise in temperature, people aren't going to die. So then if you're at that point, you're like, okay, well, if people aren't going to die and Russia's drilling oil anyway, why should we shut down this pipeline, right? Like the Keystone pipeline that was shut down by Biden. That cost a lot of people a lot of money and a lot of jobs. And it's one thing to say, well, good for the environment. But what if you were counting on that job to live? There's a lot of people who are like they don't have their parents' money or, are able to live in one income off of a tech industry or something like that. It's like jobs are life for people, so for somebody to not have a job is like basically to not have life. So to smugly say you can't have this type of job it always just feels fucked up to me.
Well, that's what the tech industry does as well. I mean, I hear what you're saying about sometimes climate concerns get in the way of people's livelihoods, but the tech industry is in many ways predicated on ending people's careers, on taking entire job sectors and erasing them, and having an evangelical belief that there is an across-the-board inherent good in that, that there are only good outcomes by erasing an entire occupation off the face of the earth.
Yeah, like one of the things I thought was very compelling about Andrew Yang's the early part of his presidential career when he was coming off of like having written his book about like the future and it was largely focused on automation. And it was one of the reasons why I liked him so much was he was talking about how there's this really fucked up thing where people who are like basically pushing automation they're like, well, these truckers will just retrain for other jobs.
Yeah, learn to code.
You learn to code, right? Like that was the whole thing. And it's like, man, I'm a person who literally went from being a bartender to have a pretty good job. Like my parents are stoked at where I ended up, and it took everything I could to do it. And I'm smart. And like I'm really driven, like I worked 2 jobs, went to school full time, and I'm still pretty tenuous. You know what I mean? Now imagine you're like not the sharpest tool in the shed. Like you have kids, you can't choose to
pivot.
You can't pivot, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to work 80 hours a week at a job. Like, like I chose jobs that like I could study at the happy hour shift. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like things like that. Like now imagine you're driving a truck. You're fucked. There's no pivoting for that. Like, and at a certain point, like the biggest like ism that keeps people down is like ageism. Good luck getting hired at a tech company if you're over 50, unless you have
or over 35.
Yeah, unless you have a very specific skill set. Like even me, like I have a really highly developed skill set for what I do. I worry about aging out. You know, like what the fuck am I going to do? Suicide by cop is my option.
Please let me know when that's happening. I'm coming with lights and an iPhone.
Yeah, at least get some hits off of it. Chase that suicide clout. But yeah, like that whole thing was super offensive. Like I watched like my dad, right? Like before he died, like he could barely fill out the online job application. And he wasn't an idiot. He was like an electrician in the Air Force during Vietnam. He was a guy like rebuilt all kinds of shit around our house, but he just found navigating the whole online application process to be so crazy. Like I remember he like, it was so sad. He had like his resume on like a typed piece of paper and he's like, hey, could you look at this for me? I was like, yes. but we're gonna have to get an email address. He's like, well, I don't think I really need that. Now he's like, I have one, I think. I was like, what do you mean you think? It was just like he was like a non-dumb guy, but from a different time. There's a lot of people out there like that. Like, what do you do with them? Like, do they just become wards of the state? And I think that you see that happening right now with this whole like current great resignation thing. Like all these people are just quitting, and it makes sense. Like I think about like how fucking furious I would be if I had to drive people's food around. Like the hardest job I've ever had was delivering pizzas. It was the most gnarly job, and it required me fucking up this asset I owned. I destroyed my truck driving pizzas around New Orleans. So it's like you have to have this totally expensive asset, and you're making like no money. Like what the fuck? I mean, at least there's audiobooks and podcasts now. You could kind of educate yourself out, but
something you're saying makes me think of the way in which the contemporary American woke left, one of the isms that it seems to absolutely refuse to address or think clearly about is ageism. Of all the isms, of all the protected classes, being older is actually an inherently negative thing. But ageism it's the one ism that in this sort of woke sector that actually you're allowed to discriminate against people because of their age.
You call people boomers, like no problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Like somehow disrespecting someone based on their age has value instead of being something that you should shut the fuck up about and have some, anyway, it's very baffling to me.
Yeah. I mean, because it's like in this culture, like wisdom doesn't really have a currency at all. Like, so because things change so much, like the world's in flux so much, like the way, like you could be a very successful business person. Like you could have like 40 kookaroos, like a whole chain of chicken restaurants and be like, have 2 lake houses. You probably couldn't hang in a tech company, right? Running it. Like you just would be lost. I mean, I had a hard transition from working, basically in the marketing department at Whole Foods, and that's a Fortune 500 company. And when I switched over to startup environment, it was not like a smooth transition at all. And it's kind of I think about like the one skill set that people will need to have in like the coming world is the ability to like weather smooth transit, like just be able to suffer when things change. Like that, if you can't do that, you are fucked in the coming age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless there's a backlash, a successful backlash.
Yeah. But the older people do not control. I mean, they can like if you're like a fucking space Jew, you control media. But I don't think like older people aren't going to be able to like seize the narrative and like be like, you can't make fun of old people. Like, I just don't see like, even though like when you're over 40, you're technically a protected class in a company. Did you know that?
What?
Yeah. At the age of 40, you were a protected class in the way that like if you were gay or a minority or something like that.
What? I'm sorry. Where I work, there's no HR department. So.
Right. Like, so like, yeah. So if you're also a prole, you might not have experienced this. But yeah, like you can't discriminate against people for certain things by law. And actually, despite what people think, America has like the most strict discriminatory laws pretty much in the world. And at 40, you're part of a protected class. It kind of blew me away. I was like, whoa, that's weird.
Sweet. I was curious with this movie, which we're having a really hard time actually addressing.
I had a hard time rewatching it. I think that's part of it.
Well,
it's like,
to that, at what point when you sat down and hit play, how far into it did you go, oh.
The second time?
No, the first time.
So the first time I watched the whole movie and would say on balance, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Like I would say that like I thought it was funny because the things that I thought were funny reminded me of other things. And I'm so close to a lot of this material, like, having had this sort of like environmental background and being into the critique of the media in the way that they critique it. Like it's one of those things where it's like Breitbart's review of it was that it was a very Trumpian critique because it basically like opens up its guns on the media political collusion, which say what you want about Trump, other than Fox News and Breitbart, there was no media colluding with him, and you talk about media collusion today, thorough collusion with Biden, right? Like, in fact, the meme, the "Let's Go Brandon" meme,
Yeah.
is like, it's interesting to see people sort of misunderstanding it. It's not just a fuck Joe Biden. Fuck Joe Biden. Everyone in football stadiums across America were happily saying fuck Joe Biden just out loud.
Right.
It wasn't a problem. It wasn't until there's this one. Do you know the whole story about it?
I do, but
Yeah,
you should.
So they're at this NASCAR event, and like all over the country, people fucking hate Joe Biden. Like, they just do. And then the people who voted for him don't love him. That was the thing with Trump, is like people either hated him or loved him. With Biden, it's like meh or fuck that guy. And so all over America, there's these huge groups of people that were chanting fuck Joe Biden. They're interviewing this NASCAR guy. I think a lot of people might not know the origin of this because it's been so thoroughly covered up.
It, yeah.
But like, she's interviewing this NASCAR driver that won. His name is Brandon. And you can clearly hear the chant of fuck Joe Biden in the background. Like, you can hear it.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Oh, you hear that? They're saying, 'Let's go, Brandon.'" And the guy is like, "What?" And I think he does a pretty good job of like keeping it together, because he's like, it's his moment. He's trying not to have it. And then, but the meme, "Let's go, Brandon," isn't just fuck Joe Biden. It's about the collusion of media protecting this political figure. And it shouldn't be the job of media to protect anybody, and especially the news and especially politicians. So, I mean, that's why it like caught up. But the whole idea that it's like people are trying to make it into being like a white supremacy meme, it's just not. It's an anti-media meme. And I think more so than ever, people are seeing reasons to distrust the media. Like, they've always sort of distrusted, but you're really seeing it. Like, the entire, like, if you listen to like Matt Taibbi or Glenn Greenwald's reporting on the Russiagate stuff, I mean, it's completely made up. It's fascinating. There was never any actual Russian collusion between Trump and the Russian. It just never existed. Like, there might have been like some troll farms shitting on Hillary Clinton, but that was kind of it. And like, that's not really anybody's. But all the like the P tape and stuff, that was all literally paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign. I mean, it's madness. And you have Rachel Maddow still talking about it. I mean, she's the Alex Jones of the left, and no mainstream personality says anything about it. And then the other thing that was interesting, and I'm sure people are going to be furious about us, like even talking about this stuff, but like,
well, and by us, you mean you?
Me, yeah. I mean, you,
not Mark.
Yeah, Mark. Mark maintaining his cucklord status. But like, did you see the green hue that CNN put over Joe Rogan's face?
No, what?
Okay, so it's crazy. I looked this up because it was so absurd. I didn't think it was real. I was like, this is just some Fox News nonsense. But I looked at it. I looked in as deep into it as I could. And so basically, when Joe Rogan said he had COVID and he listed all the shit that he said he had taken, like, and one of them was ivermectin, but it was like one thing.
One of like 100 things.
Of 100 things, right? And so we'll get into that part too. But when his Instagram video of it versus the video that CNN put, they put like a filter over him. So he looks gray and green and sick. And he looks, yes. And it's like,
wait, this happened?
This happened.
Holy
like
shit.
Another time that I saw this, that the very first time I got like woke on media was they did the same thing to O.J. Simpson in the 90s. Like, all the media companies blackened him up to make him scarier looking. It was like, there was a really famous example in Time magazine. They showed, and I remember, like, I think it might have been like Public Enemy or somebody had like was talking about it on a news show or on Howard Stern or something like that. I heard it. But it was like, they were like, oh, they changed his skin tone to make him look blacker and scarier. I was like, what? That's even an option? I didn't know that was possible. But you see it like in real time, and then Joe Rogan posted the two videos side by side, and it's really dramatic. And then the whole ivermectin thing. Look, ivermectin, it's not horse medicine. It's used in horses, but it's developed for humans. And it's one of like 10 things this dude took. Would I take it? Probably not. I don't give a shit. But I've had COVID twice now. I would probably take fucking anything if it would shorten the sickness. It sucks. But like the whole narrative around him, like he took horse medicine or whatever, it's just not true. And then when he had Sanjay Gupta on, like, you just see this, like, the mask fall on CNN. And like, if you're a regular person, you don't even have to like Joe Rogan. You probably don't, most people. But you see these companies lying. And you can't, when you're like, okay, well, what else are they lying about?
Yep.
You know, or like the fucking weapons of mass destruction thing, like during the Iraq War. Like, how many news agencies ran with that lie? It's just fucking madness. So the movie lays like a really strong critique on that sort of behavior.
Right.
But it's also a Hollywood movie. It's part of it. You know, it's weird, like how it's like it's snitching on itself or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I almost immediately disliked this movie, just on a visceral level.
Yeah.
And I know that's not important to...
That's how it went for people. People either hated it or like were like, it was okay.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a critique. It's just like my experience of watching this movie was that So I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but Monique and I have watched a lot of shows, and we have, I'd say like 50% of our conversations are talking about like movies and art and shit.
Well, you're artistes.
And so we have a lot of rules, you know, like if we go see a show, we have a rule. We don't talk about the show until we're 1 block away from the theater. Just have some respect. And, you know, if you say something and you're standing next to the artist's mom that can be slightly misinterpreted, it's just going to be negative. It's just going to be a negative thing. So don't talk about art until you're a block away. And we sort of have had to have a lot of rules around watching movies because we've both had experiences of like watching a movie together and one of us is loving it and the other is hating it. And the person who's hating it says something snarky and it sort of yucks the yum of the person who's enjoying it. And that's not cool. So we had to have a rule of like, shut the fuck up, just let the movie play. And then we watched some movie a couple of years ago where we got through the whole thing and then realized we both totally despised it, but wanted to be cool and not say anything. So we had to revise the rule to go like, okay, we can politely hit pause and just check in if one of us is like seriously not into it. And I voted to shut this movie off.
My wife has none of these rules. We went to see a movie. I don't want to say what it is because she would probably, because it's a pretty well regarded movie, but I could see what she was not into it. And we're sitting there and she goes, "This is boring." We're in the theater. She goes, "This is boring," and she just gets up and leaves.
So
I was
real.
like, "Whoa!"
Love it.
And I'm like, "This is the greatest movie ever." We have radically different tastes, but
I'm sure.
But so, what did Monique think about this movie?
She voted to keep watching. I didn't know we were going to do an episode that we had not discussed doing an episode about this. So it was just a movie that was on Netflix that looked cute on Christmas Eve or whatever. And I just wanted to shut it off. And Monique was like, I want to see where it goes. I would like
Such a
there's
buzzkill for a Christmas movie, huh?
It really is.
Yeah.
And I don't put a lot of weight in that sort of thing, but I was also definitely not in the fucking mood to, during a holiday where I couldn't see, you know, my mom lives 45 minutes away and I couldn't even go see her because of COVID. And then this fucking the bummer of a movie is my warm blanket.
One of the lines I liked that's kind of related to this is when they're doing the talk show for the first time and Jennifer Lawrence's character says, "This is the end of the fucking world. It doesn't have to be friendly or sweet," or whatever she says. And then this movie just proceeds to sort of like waffle between the hosts and her perspective, where it's like it is mostly a funny movie, and you know, like in a normal movie everyone wouldn't die, but everybody dies in this movie, you know, so it has this like bummer ending for Christmas, which is a little weird. You would think that there would be like some sort of like Deus Ex Machina, like where it's like there's a revolution of young people who do whatever, or you know, who knows? Like, or like you. So on one hand, I sort of respect the bummer ending.
Sure, I mean,
there's part of me that's like, okay, like I get it. This is cool, you know. But it's also deeply unsatisfying. And then the post-credit scene doubles down on the dissatisfaction.
The mid-credits or post-credits?
So the mid-credit scene is funny to me.
I thought it was terrible.
The reason why I think it's funny is like I've been watching a lot of YouTubers lately because I've been sort of like, as a marketing professional, I think it's good to like bathe yourself in the blood of the young every once in a while to refresh yourself like Madonna does.
Yeah.
And the way you do that in a work from home environment is just to watch you say, what has over 100 million views that I've never heard of?
Right.
And so it's put me down this direction of like this thing. And it seems very much what like Jake Paul would do at the end of times. And so to me, it was funny.
I didn't think Jonah Hill was funny. That's the post credits. The mid credits is the pod
When they land?
When they land is
I thought that was the
mid-credits.
last. The last thing is Jonah Hill.
The last thing is John
Oh,
Hill.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I'm getting them reverse. But yeah, one, it's so bad. The CGI is so bad that and not like the rest of the movie was really great looking or anything, but it's so cartoony at the end. And then the other thing it does, it sort of undermines the logic of the film a little bit in that he was able to predict the existence of a specific type of creature 22,000 years in the future on another planet, but his shtick, like his comet thing didn't work. It's like...
Yeah. One thing I did think that was cute about his predictions is that he predicted that Leonardo DiCaprio's character would die alone, but he actually dies surrounded by his family and loved ones. There are little things in this movie that are good.
The other thing is that like the movie asserts in the bummer ending sort of the value of faith. Like it's literally like you have to imagine Sisyphus pushing the stone up the hill, smiling.
Yeah.
Like, and to me, that is like one of the most appealing philosophical ideas ever. Like I just love that. Like life is suffering. Tell life to go fuck itself. Like I think it's just great. And then I thought the slow motion destruction around the people sitting around the table. There was something really like, I don't know. I thought that especially Timothée Chalamet's like prayer. There's something about that scene that I thought was really strong.
And I totally agree and completely out of place. It was like another movie.
Yeah, it was like a different film.
And I think that... So how familiar are you with the Dead Kennedys?
It's very familiar.
So Dead Kennedys' like early work, the first two albums, or three albums in particular, are like, there are songs like Police Truck, which is about police violence, or Terminal Preppy, which is about shallow college boys. And, all their songs were about these sort of like incisive critiques about something mostly in American culture. Mm-hmm. And then Frankenchrist came out, and it's like every song contains every gripe Jello Biafra ever had. Like every song on that album feels like just a litany of random complaints. And I feel like this movie was like that. It was just like trying to take on every single political gripe and every political concern and simultaneously applying to it every filmic style.
Yeah, there's even like Koyaanisqatsi interludes, which
kind
thought
of reminded me of like Lucy. What's the filmmaker's name? The one who did Fifth Element.
Oh, Luc Besson.
Yeah, it's sort of a Besson thing.
Yeah, It had that, and then it has the "Catch Me If You Can" score throughout the whole thing, like the sort of like jazzy, like in like the really loud.
Yeah.
And it has like the kind of funny modern like. This is a real agency. This is their logo. Like there's pop-ups throughout it.
Yep.
How bad were the memes? Remember when there's like, there's the whole meme that the left can't meme.
Yeah.
Like that left-wing memes are not funny.
Yeah.
Which is true. I thought it was hilarious that the memes that they made to like make fun of her after her appearance were just not good.
Sure.
It's like, go get Tony Hinchcliffe and have him come tune these up. You know what I mean? Like, let's do a little work here, like, and make this like mean. It needs to be meaner.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the ending, like, it did give me an idea for a short story, though, like, which I thought was kind of a decent idea. Like, okay, so the pod lands, it opens up. For sure, there's going to be weapons on that ship, right? Like, they're not all going to be killed by these fucking dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs are going to get full after they eat like a dozen people. So some of them will survive. And so to me, like the whole idea that they get to live, so they win. Like it's very like Ayn Rand, John Galt's Gulch. Like to me, like they don't all necessarily die. But I was thinking about like they would definitely need to bring with them like servants. So there would need to be technicians and things like that. Maybe even like special forces guys to fight off the dinosaurs. Once all those people landed, those capable people who could build things and shoot things would immediately take over.
Totally.
Like they would so I thought that would be an interesting story. Like, like where basically you have a restart where society is built on just total competency with a technological edge. Like you just go right to Robert Heinlein land with that, I think.
Well, that also reminds me of one of the chapters in World War Z, the celebrity, the rich celebrity who has a compound and has all these people working at the compound, and they're like live streaming their experience of Armageddon. And you know, that chapter is told from the perspective of one of the, I think it was a security guard.
Yeah, he was like a Blackwater guy.
Yeah. So the competent person survives. The elite doesn't.
Man, that book is the audiobook is really worth listening to.
It's so good. I've listened to it twice.
I was talking to somebody today about it, and I said it's basically like Zombie Studs Trickle.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just a great concept.
Fully. I feel like all my notes are quite random at this point.
Just like this film.
It's truly.
The notes on this film must have been a nightmare with all these celebrities.
Oh God!
You know what I mean? Like
every one of those celebrities had some weird dietary restriction.
Oh man,
in the green room.
Oh my God, the fucking catering for this must have been a nightmare. Jesus Christ!
That's the interesting movie. It's the catering for one of these fucking movies.
Well, Party Down's coming back, so maybe we'll.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so stoked.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that as well.
I tried to rewatch it. It doesn't hold up as well.
It doesn't. And you know, we talked about our initial experience watching this film. I found the second way through completely. I couldn't watch it. Like it was. I couldn't.
Totally.
I couldn't get through it.
So the political signifying in this movie kind of made me think about fan servicing, and it brought to me the questions around what is the difference between watching a Marvel movie that does a bunch of fan servicing and satisfies your investment in having spent time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the comic books, and how much is that like watching a movie like Don't Look Up that is doing another kind of fan servicing, which is stoking your political agreement, your investment in your own politics. So fan servicing in the MCU isn't necessarily about making better art, making something funny, blah, blah, blah. It's about like satisfying the viewer in some really surface way.
Yeah.
And I found that this movie is sort of doing the same thing, but it's about politics. It's not about some Spider-Man villain from 25 years ago.
Yeah. I think all of politics is doing that. You know, like, I mean, especially Trump. I mean, to get up there and be like, I think Jesus should let you have an AR-15 because it's what your truck would want. You're like, what is going on here? Like, you're like, you know, I'm with the common man. Like, you've always been rich. What are you talking about? And then it seemed like every congressperson basically just wants to be an influencer. Like they're all these weird characters, especially like the younger influencers. You have that super right-wing Republican dude that's in the wheelchair that never really corrects people when they think he was injured in combat. He wasn't, you know, like there's that guy. And then there's like the guy with the eye patch, you know, and then there's like the woman that just got thrown off of Twitter because she's like literally a QAnon candidate. And then you have like AOC, who is clearly ridiculous. Like, oh my God, come on.
She's my favorite.
Well, I was, because she was a bartender, I could not have rooted for her more.
Right.
Like when she first came on the scene, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And also she's hot, which I know this is super shallow, but like, I like that sort of thing. But you know, like it's just, she's just not as informed on the stuff as she should be. Like she was talking about some climate change thing and her science was just so off. And I think when you're talking about like science related shit, you kind of got to come correct, you know, but other stuff, like I like her on like the minimum wage stuff and the student debt, basically her Bernie Sanders stuff I like, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, the fact that she's up in New York talking about how fucking terrible Florida is and then goes down to Florida and is like mask off at a drag brunch, it's a bad look.
Yeah.
I think that is like the thing that's ultimately going to turn people against, like, that would allow my nightmare scenario of President Joe Rogan, Defense Secretary Jake Paul, is the whole rules for thee, but not for me.
Yep.
A more compelling message is rules for no one. You know, like that's like way more fun. You're like, hey, fuck it. Like, I think that, because it's like all of these, like, presumably on the right side candidates have all done something that completely demonstrates their lack of concern for the common person. Like every single one of them. Lori Lightfoot, Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, even Bernie was walking. Well, actually, I think Bernie's always been pretty, like, that's the one thing that's great about him, even though he's a fucking terrible communist, is he seems pretty committed to his poor guy shtick, other than the $3 million house. But you know what? That money, well, what I would say is it's the same thing, like why I think the criticism against the Black Lives Matter woman that has all the real estate now, she wrote books and made money. She fucking earned it. Like, just because you support a communist organization like Black Lives Matter doesn't mean you shouldn't get your fucking finances together and invest in property. I mean, like, the criticism against her, I think, is absolutely stupid. And then the criticism against Bernie for being a millionaire, it's like, you can become a millionaire, you know? And who knows? Like, maybe he'll give it away. He certainly isn't spending it on clothes or bitches.
God.
Could you imagine if he was just like, fuck it, I got diamond teeth now? That would be so hilarious. Like,
he would win the next election. They'd be like Biden.
The people at the DNC would just be like, all right, we got to figure out how to sink him now. We just can't. How do we sink him? Like, we got to get a sex tape once. Like, we got to rig a sex tape with the Island Boys or something. Like, we got to bring him down,
dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the thing. Like, this nightmare ludicrous scenario is just so much more appealing than the finger wagging that we have now. You know, it's like all of society is torn between this like buzzkill finger wagging and this just ludicrous revisionist, like the 80s were actually awesome mentality. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, can't we get somebody who is at least honest? I mean, that's why I think like people like Joe Rogan, as ridiculous as he is, he's not lying. He might be wrong and buffoonish, but like there's no lies.
Right.
You know?
Dear God.
Like when you bring an obvious crazy person like Alex Jones on and you just get hammered with him and you go like, well, he's crazy, but he's my friend. I mean, it's hard to, you know, like that to me is much more palatable than shut everything down and wear a mask or else. And then you're like inside drinking $20,000 bottles of wine at the French Laundry. Like, you know what I mean? Totally. Like there's like, maybe I'm just like a goon.
No, that is part of what made Trump such an appealing candidate, is that he was like us to some people, you know, because he had a potty mouth and wasn't very eloquent and dressed poorly and whatever. You know, it's weird. I don't want to get into it too deeply, but I'm in the middle of applying to grad school. And so I've listened to a lot of the back episodes of this podcast just to sort of be paranoid and go like, what have I said?
Shall we be canceled?
Yeah, like as a candidate for a school, for a degree, what is the worst thing I've said or the conversations we've had that maybe aren't exactly candidate worthy? And I totally stand behind pretty much everything I've said, thank God. I've listened back until this episode. I'm kind of wondering about this one. Oh,
please, you're still
like right at the last second.
You're still safe. Right. I think it's also like an average height person will look tall standing next to a short person.
Yeah.
You know, so like I think I'm so much worse.
But even
then, I'm not that bad, really.
No, but then there's also the problem of if someone listened to this podcast for the first time, would they just go like, confuse me for you?
Oh.
Yeah. Or see, that's why I'm constantly reminding people who's speaking.
Well, one of us did get a free ride to Berkeley with their attitude.
That's true.
Yeah. So.
Fuck.
But that, I mean, I don't know. Like, I actually expected, I think when we do our 100th episode, the What Have We Learned, you know, I expected to have, especially your friends, to be way more not into me. But it sounds like isn't Monique's mom like a fan?
Or something?
Yeah. Like it's the weirdest. Yeah. It just seems to me that like, you know, I think I'm like an average person out there, you know, like I think that, you know, you just want to have fun and be left alone mostly and like be healthy. And like, I don't want to tell other people what to do. And, you know, like I think that's fine. That's a fine position.
Yep.
Probably say retard too much, but you know, whatever. Yeah. We all have our foibles.
Do we have anything else on this movie?
No. I mean, it's just like it just continues the descent into premium mediocrity, man.
It is. Let's see. Looking at my notes, like I complained about that already. I already complained about that. I bitched about that.
What do I have in here?
Oh, you know how we often talk about in horror movies, how do you get rid of the cell phone? That if you have a retro film, there were no cell phones, so it's easy for the protagonist to get trapped and the killer can't call for help. And then in contemporary movies, they always have to have no bars or the cell phone gets lost or whatever.
Yeah.
This movie, as a horror, it's the opposite. We're presented with the absolute interconnectedness of everything. And that is actually the blockade to communication, that they can't get their message out because there's too much interconnected communication. I mean, that's just holding up a mirror to where we are right now. Like, everybody's connected to everybody else and we've never felt so alone. We have access to more information than ever before in human history, and we're simultaneously becoming less informed and more divisive. There's more opportunity for connection, and we hate each other. Like there are all these polarities, and that's one, at least the way it overlaps with horror cinema, is that this trope of how to get people alone here, it's the opposite of alone, and it's worse than if there were restrictions, a world in which there were restrictions on communication. That's all.
I think that's very much in line with Ted Kaczynski's opinions.
Oh, one thing the funniest thing about Jonah Hill, I think in 10 years, is not him in this movie, but something he said working on the character for this movie, which is, I guess he said, "What if Fire Festival was a person?"
I feel like there's a lot of YouTubers like that.
Yep.
I feel like that's what like NFTs are. What if Fire Festival was money? I think it was. I know you're not a super fan, but Tim Dillon said that the entire economy is now a scam economy, and it made me think of.
I don't know if that's I don't know if that's ever not been true.
Well, it made me think of two other almost identical statements on the economy that I really loved. One was from our hero Vladimir Putin. He said, "I do not understand the American economy. It's just people without money selling houses to each other," which I thought was pretty amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then Anthony Bourdain said something similar, which he said the most of the American economy is just people selling cheeseburgers to each other.
Yeah.
And then I thought about Anthony Bourdain versus Putin's perspective on that. And it's really only a few companies selling cheeseburgers to people. And it's kind of the same way with messaging. There's only a few messages and there's only a few people really pushing them.
I would have liked to have seen the movie of just the skaters, just Chalamet, just these kids who are probably sort of like nihilist dead end kids anyway, and then the world's going to end. And so the stakes are lower. Or,
I mean, could you imagine how good a movie would be?
And then they're just hanging out and like the preeminent scientist who discovered why the world is ending comes and is just like hanging out in your squat.
Yeah, that would be
because she's like, fuck it as much as you. That would be far more interesting and a far better critique of everything that we're living right now.
Yeah, I feel like you could have just focused in on half the characters in this movie, and it would have been a better movie.
Yeah, despite the fact that actually, unfortunately, like Cate Blanchett is actually great. Tyler Perry, totally great. Like all these people playing these bit parts in this movie are like, except for Jonah Hill, are like really solid.
Man, you really hate Jonah Hill.
No, I'm just trying to
bring him down a notch. I think he's gotten too big for his britches.
No, you know what? Actually, I feel about Jonah Hill the way I feel about, like I was saying earlier, about McKay. Just like, Jonah Hill's great. What the fuck happened, dude?
Yeah, he really has. I feel like Jonah Hill has become Jonah Hill from This Is the End. It's like when
he was so good in that movie.
It's like when like there's this story that Bill Murray really never stopped being Hunter S. Thompson after he played him in Where the Buffalo Roam. Like there's like a demarcation in his career and antics, and it has to do with spending like a year hanging out with Hunter S. Thompson. And I feel like a similar thing may have happened with This Is the End. Like after that movie, he just became like shitty Jonah Hill for real.
That's sort of like what happened with Bono. Is he came to America and U2 was doing this like American music for a while, and so that's when he donned the hat and the sunglasses and was this like hyper rock star persona. I mean, he always kind of was. He always had that swagger, but he became this almost like he was performing a parody of a rock star, and it never ended. Do you know what I mean? He was trying to do this like ironic thing, and it never stopped. Bono was already halfway there, and he became fully that thing after that period in his career.
Yeah, it's interesting people who like start playing a character and then it becomes like, even like Andrew Dice Clay is a perfect example. Like the Dice Man was simply one of his characters, and now that character does not drop away.
Yeah.
You know, that's just how he is.
Did we talk about this movie?
Yeah, we talked about it enough. Yeah, look, if you're this far in, you're definitely a trooper.
I'm afraid this is going to be one of those episodes that people are like, yeah, that was my favorite episode so far. Like,
it always
really?
is. It always
whenever
is.
we are like, that didn't go well, it's like the ones that people like the most.
Yeah, I had so much that I thought I was going to say about this movie. Like, I had just lists of, like, I had like a really spicy Fauci rant planned, and I just decided to table that.
Save it for your blog, Grandpa.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think this film is if you could even call it that, is just a continued evidence of the decline of quality filmmaking, and Netflix is just terrible.
Netflix, bring back Teenage Bounty Hunters and Floor is Lava. That's what you're good at.
Or just double the production rate of Cobra Kai. Either way, and we're square.
All right. So as we said at the beginning of this episode, send us emails for our post-quarantine, because it is clearly over, Q&A. We're at whatthe, at scarythoughts.org. Ask us questions. We will answer them.
Yep.
It'll be super fun for everybody. And thanks for listening.
Peace. You just like give money to charity and you're a vegan? I mean, what the fuck? Sounds terrible.